Hi, I'm John Fanning, CEO of Multimedia Engineering Corp. I'm here today to introduce International Grandmaster Roman Dzindzichasvili in a series of instructional chess videos. Before shifting his emphasis from playing to training, Roman was considered one of the top 10 chess players in the world. The chess training system that Multimedia has developed with Roman includes instructional chess videos and interactive chess software. How well does this system work? Well, I just finished a 6-game rated match with the USCF rated master. I won every game. We hope that you'll experience similar results. Thanks.
We made a tape on Dzingi Indian opening. I had personally great results with that opening, and results that made white to change from that opening to the other. In other words, not to allow this. Not to allow after d4, g6, c4, bishop g7, knight c3, c5, d5, bishop takes c3. So white does not allow it. So, and they have several ways to avoid Dzingi Indian. So if you want to learn the Dzingi Indian defense and the opening for black, you absolutely have to be prepared for a white's other continuations where they won't let you play it. After d4, g6, white can still play c4 and then avoid Dzingi Indian, or play e4. Those are the lines we will be covering in this tape. So let's go on with c4 first. Go bishop g7, and white goes knight c3. And now after c5, we know, and we covered that in a Dzingi Indian tape, that if white plays knight f3, after cd, knight takes d4, and knight c6, black has a good game. So same thing happens if white tries after c5 to play e3. Then black has to play knight f6, and white cannot practically play d5, because then they're gonna enter King's Indian defense with the tempo down, and nobody will want to do that for white. And after knight f3, black castles, and after bishop e2, black plays cd, ed, and d5. So this gives us very comfortable position where black does not have any opening difficulties. So this briefly tells us what happens if white tries to avoid Dzingi Indian after d4, g6, c4, bishop g7, knight c3, c5. Okay, what happens if white tries to avoid it earlier on move 3 or maybe even move 2? So d4, g6, bishop g7, c4, d4, g6, c4, bishop g7, and now instead of knight c3 move, white plays e4. Now we're going to enter one of the two openings. When we play c5 in this position, and we do play c5, white has only two moves, practically two moves. It's d5 or the knight f3. Now, such a move as d takes c when black can simply play knight to a6 and knight takes c5, or queen a5 check and queen takes c5, cannot be seriously considered for white. So after c5, white has two moves, d5 and knight f3, so start with d5. Now we entered completely different opening, and it's not King's Indian, even though it looks like King's Indian, but there may be some transpositions to King's Indian, and it's kind of Benoni type of opening. d6, knight f3 or knight c3, knight f6, knight c3, black castles, and in this position white has several ways to conclude development. The simple way is to play bishop to e2 followed by castling, or bishop to d3 and pawn to h3. The most popular way to play today for white is h3 and bishop to d3. Now, let's start with bishop e2. Black goes e6. White castles. And now if black plays e takes d, then we get very well-known position after c takes d. We don't want to play this position. We want to play something on our own, something that does not allow white to play knight to d2 and knight to c4, which is the main plan in this position, in this opening. So what we want to do is, we did play e6, but we are not in a hurry to take on d5. Now what we do is we go rook to e8. And now after rook e8, we do want to take on d5. Because in this case, white will not be able to take with the c-pawn, since e-pawn will be hanging. So if white wants to try to get to regular Benoni continuations, then they have to play knight d2. Now, perfect position for white will be if black took on d5, then white will retake with the c-pawn, and later they will protect their e-pawn and play knight c4. This is the ideal. And here comes the main opening idea for black. Black did play e6, black did play rook e8. All indications they want to take on d5, but they are not taking on d5. They are not freeing the c4 square for white knight. So what they play instead is they play knight to a6. After knight to a6, what's black's plan? They want to play knight to c7. They want to try to play b6, a6, and try to play b5. What can white do after knight a6? Suppose white plays f3. So this is useful move. White still expects black to take on d5, and after which knight will go on c4. But we continue knight to c7. And here, white should realize that they have a problem. They have a problem with developing the rest of their pieces. How can they do that? They can either moving this knight out of d2, which they put it there like a couple of moves ago, and then developing the bishop, or taking on e6 and then moving the knight.